Hi, I'm Valerie Engelhart, and in this video I am going to be painting a loose Dutch iris flower without the use of a preliminary sketch. I am using my Rockwell art paints, and the colors I'm going to be using are royal purple, Alexandra diamond purple. I'm going to be pulling out some Onnit diamond yellow, which is a green color, as well as magic wizard, which is kind of like a golden brown. A lot of the Rockwell Canada paints, I keep saying Rockwell Canada, I think they changed their name to Rockwell Art, but if you Google either of those you should get to the right place. But it's from their magic set, and I love how the paints granulate. So like you can kind of see at the top of my iris, that purple is already splitting into like almost a pink magenta color. The royal purple is much warmer. It will split into warmer colors. The Alexandra diamond purple is cooler, so you'll get like some blue or ultramarine look out of it. Anyway, I haven't described any of what I'm doing, so I am loosely painting in the petals, and now where the petals connect to the stem. I do have a reference photo that I am holding off to the side, but because I don't work with a sketch, I am winging it, just eyeballing, flicking my brush to create any curved marks. Up at the top, I'm letting the petals merge together, just letting them bleed and fuse into each other, and then even bleeding some of those edges away to create lost and found edges, because I do like an atmospheric look. Now on the lower petals, irises usually have those lines or veins, and because I'm painting wet into wet right now, I'm not going in with detail, but I am setting up the idea of the shape and structure of these petals. Now another thing I'm doing is I am playing with the idea of runbacks, those cauliflowers, or watercolor blooms, but something that happens where there's like a puddle, and as it dries, it pushes pigment and creates a texture. And these are granulating paints, so I'm interested to see what happens. So if you look at that bottom petal, all of that pigment is sitting there really heavy, but it's also very wet, and so as it dries, there's going to be a texture created. Now, one thing I'm using with my size 8 round brush by Silver Black Velvet is I am lifting, and that's just to create more shape in the petals, some more highlight. And petals are very delicate and soft, and so I like using the lifting technique for creating light because it's soft and like you can see the watercolor paper through it better, but versus like leaving a white area, it's a little too stark for me. So yeah, I love to lift things. And I don't know if you can hear, I've got a cat that jumped in my lap and he is purring up a storm. So if that affects the audio, I do greatly apologize. Please enjoy the sound of a happy cat. So now I'm going in and dropping in some stronger color. That is one of my favorite things to do wet into wet, is to paint a shape and then just load it up with a strong color and let it fuse and merge. Especially with these granulating paints that split into other colors. There are even paints out there that will split into like wildly different colors. These ones will all split into something that is, I guess, expected. Like this purple isn't going to split and you'll suddenly get a green, though I do have a paint that does that by this company. So I did let that little petal and that larger bottom petal touch and fuse in that one spot because I enjoy that. It's good to have some of the color merge. It's a good loose effect. And on this petal, I'm doing the same thing on the left as I did on the right, where I'm creating a puddle. And part of having this run back is my paper is on a block, and that block I have at about I don't know, maybe a 25-30 degree angle. So not a very extreme angle, it is slight, but it does allow the water to pool and puddle, because if this was on a flat surface, that water would spread out evenly. And I don't want it to spread out evenly, I want it to gather. But I need to be careful not to add too much water or it will create a drip, which sometimes is what I want, but not in this case, because if a drip happens, then all of the water is going to follow that path. Water will follow the path of least resistance, and then I'll lose that experimental bloom I'm going for. Now that almost looks like a petal that I'm painting right now, but that's actually a bud. Irises have buds that are really big and often very close to the flower. And then just softening some more and lifting the center. So I am lifting the center of those larger petals because those areas are usually white or yellow. And if I do want to go in with yellow later, it's good to be able to paint on white versus purple because yellow and purple are complementary colors. Watercolor is transparent. If I put yellow on top of the purple, it's not going to be as vibrant as if I put it on a white surface. So my painting had to be left to dry naturally. You can't blow dry a painting if you're trying to get these texture effects. And here's what I got. And I want to accentuate it. So to accentuate that, I'm doing some negative painting by painting around those little like roughly cauliflower marks with a darker value. And I'm using a liner brush for this and then bleeding it away. And I'm also using that liner brush to illustrate where the petals either like join up at the stem or where there's a fold in the petal. But notice how those bottom petals, that pigment was very heavy, and so the bottom is like blue and almost opaque, whereas where it was pushed by the water, it turned into a pink color, and then everything above it is more of a purple. And I just think that's really fascinating, the effects that you can get with these pigments. So I'm just using my liner brush, and this doesn't need to be a professional piece. This is me playing around and learning, and I usually use the iris when I'm trying out new techniques or colors or ideas I have, just because they are such a unique shaped flower. And with their unique shape, I can do just about anything, and as long as I get the rough composition correct, people will know it's an iris. And I'm just doing the same thing on the other lower petal that I did at the beginning of this segment, where I am painting on top of those little like ruffly marks and then bleeding that color up to create a shadow, so painting negatively. And then painting in some detail lines just to show how ruffly that petal is. And the photo I got for this, I'm pretty sure I got it from Unsplash, but I do have Dutch irises that grow in my garden. So it's been a little while since I've painted this one, if I'm being honest, and I don't remember if it was from my garden. But you can find lots of different reference images on copyright-free sites like Pixabay, Petals, Unsplash. That way you're not intruding on a photographer's copyright. Those websites are copyright-free. So you're free to use whatever photo you want. So now I'm up at the upper petal and I'm just adding in details and lines and then going and bleeding them away with my round size 8 brush. So I'm able to do that and soften everything while still keeping a fair amount of detail. Because when I was painting those lines, I went in pretty thick with pigment. Now it's not juicy straight from the tube. I am working from dried paint that I've put into my palette. When you put it on thick and then like lightly wet it with a damp brush, you won't get as much movement as, say, going in with very wet lines than a sopping wet brush. So that was a lot of words to say. Water control is really important in how you get your effects. Now, because this upper petal is behind the other petals, I am putting more pigment on it and using a cooler color because warm colors come forward, cool colors recede. So I'm using the cooler purple to push that petal back in space. Now, putting in all those little ruffly lines is more than I usually care to do, but I was feeling like, well, again, this is a practice piece, and practice pieces are great for pushing things. Take things farther than you might normally go. Because who knows, maybe I would discover that I love painting those lines. Or maybe I would learn, hey, you know what, you don't really need those for the composition. And then I can take that knowledge onto my next painting. Now, when going back and reviewing the footage, I realized I forgot to record a certain part, and that is at the very end of this. I thought that it was looking fine, but kind of boring, and since this is a practice piece, I went and grabbed some other colors and glazed on some of these petals, particularly the ones at the top, because everything's really purple. Even though they're different shades of purple, and yes, some of it splits, but it was getting kind of boring. And so, after shutting this off, I did glaze like some yellow. Because even though, yeah, sure, it won't show up as yellow, it will still warm up an area, maybe make it look like some sunlight's hitting it. Or I would glaze another area with like a teal blue just to make it more visually appealing, more fun. You don't have to stick with whatever colors you see. And then finally, I pull out some golden crackle paste, just because those lines that are on the lower iris petals, I thought, hey, that might be interesting. What if I apply this paste using my small palette knife, and I'm applying the paste directionally. So I'm trying to do it in the direction that the texture would form. Now, on one hand, petals are really light and silky, and this kind of a paste is not light and silky. But it's a learning piece, and I want to learn and see what effect does this give me on an iris. And so you have to wait for your painting to be completely dry, and if you put on the paste like really, really thick, you'll get thick, deep cracks that are much larger and spaced further apart. And then if you apply it like a thin layer, you'll get very fine, close together cracks. They might not be as pronounced, but it just depends on the effect that you're going for. So I'm going in, after I got down my initial layer, I'm going in really thick because I want those cracks to be pronounced and act as those lines on the iris. And I'm even scratching some of those lines in to give further suggestion, just to see what will happen. And here's the finished painting. If you liked this video, press that like button so I know to make more like it. And if you have any suggestions for what you want me to paint, go ahead and add those in the comments below. I'm always looking for new subjects. Thanks so much for watching. I'll catch you next time. Bye!